And I'm going to try something, just a second. Okay, can you guys see this?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. This is a flyer I created that I have used in evangelism before, but I will admit there are people who are uncomfortable with this approach. And there's part of me, I guess, that's a little uncomfortable with it, but I thought it was still a good beginning approach. And so I thought I'd share it with you guys and see what you think, see if you think I should throw it out or if I should go ahead and continue to use it. It's called Come Join Our Unity Movement. And I've handed these out at our booths that we have done. I put them in Bibles that we give away. And I probably should remove that word you see highlighted, contradistinction, because most people would say, okay, I'm done reading this now. But it starts off with trying to get people to see that there are many ways in which we are united with each other. Usually in evangelism, people focus on all the differences. Sometimes they'll focus on the differences by doing a bunch of classes on, quote, the one true church versus denominationalism. Sometimes people will just focus on, okay, you don't believe in how the Bible teaches baptism, so we're going to focus on that. This is a different approach. I'm not saying this approach is better. I'm just saying it's different. And I'm always willing to try something different if I think it might work. So it goes like this, as you can see. You start off with admitting, yes, that the religious world is divided. But then you also state the opposite of that. The Christian religious world is united. And hopefully stating it will pique their interest because you seemingly said a contradiction. And then you admit that there's no denying that churches across the spiritual spectrum disagree on a host of important, indispensable, and defining issues. But yet you want to focus on Jesus' prayer of unity, John chapter 17. If they're not familiar with that, then of course you would want to read that. So what I do with these people is I said, so if we have all of these divisions, I know where we can start, and that is where we agree. Now, before I go even further, oftentimes that is a good way to begin any discussion. Instead of focusing on the disagreements, focus on the agreements. Would you agree that that's a good way?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So then I say, okay, well, if we're going to focus on where we agree, that sounds simple, maybe too simple, but it might even be radical enough, yet simple enough to work. In fact, I tell people, if you visit our congregation, you will discover that you agree with us almost everything we do. Now, again, stating that should pique their interest. That when they come there, they're not going to see a bunch of things that they don't agree with, but they're going to see a bunch of things that they already believe are true. So that's when I ask them, if I can prove my claim, would you be willing to consider joining our unity movement? And then I go through, where do we agree? And the first one, as you can see, is it is scriptural to call ourselves Christians. And that's what we call ourselves at our congregation. And if you believe in Jesus, do you mind if people call you a Christian? Nobody who believes in Jesus is going to object to that. That is a name everybody can agree we can wear. However, if you are a Catholic, do you want to be called a Baptist? Or vice versa? No. And yet, we can all agree, excuse me, we can all agree on biblical names. Nobody would have a problem calling themselves a Christian, a believer, or a disciple. And then I ask the question, if we all called ourselves by names that God inspired, would that be scriptural? And are you willing to agree to do what you agree is scriptural? Then if so, I ask the question, come join our unity movement and be called a Christian. Okay, so before I go on with the other things that we all agree on, what do you think of this approach so far? Do you have any problems with it?
I like it. It's very good. It comes at it this in a different approach, but in a very great way to reach people and get them thinking, but get them to approach this in an open way. It's very, very good. Absolutely.
Not necessarily now, but I would like discussion of what it means to fulfill John 17. It seems to me a lot of times we approach John 17 as though God did not answer Jesus' prayer in the affirmative.
That's
When
an
it seems to
interesting.
me like he surely did.
When I've preached on John 17, I have often emphasized that, Jesus was united with his disciples. And yet the disciples still were not perfect. So the unity of John 17 doesn't mean that we all agree on everything or that we are perfect, but rather that we are united in Jesus, in purpose. And in that way, I think God, has answered Jesus' prayer. But I would also say that, excuse me, Jesus' prayer needs to be continually answered by those who are not one with him. So I just think Alan volunteered to do a class on John chapter 17.
Yeah.
And we'll be looking forward to that, Alan.
My wife's calling me.
Well, yeah, Perry, I agree with Alan. I'll let him do the sermon in class, but I'll agree with him. But Jesus said in John 10, there shall be one shepherd and one fold. And what I point out to people is there is still just one shepherd and one fold. That was the answer, I think, to that prayer of unity. However, I do like what you say in the sense that we want to make sure that we're also one with the Lord. That's our concern, if that makes sense. But I do like the approach.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's keep going. The next one, after being called a Christian, which everybody would agree that is scriptural, is communion or the Lord's Supper. And I point out every first day of the week, our congregation celebrates and commemorates our Savior in his supper. Acts chapter 20, verse 7. Every Sunday, we eat unleavened bread and drink fruit of the vine. 1 Corinthians 11. Then I ask, do you know of any religious group that would think this action unscriptural? Now, it's important to use the word unscriptural because there are some people who say, well, it might not be wise to do it because you we'll get bored with it. It'll become mundane. And so we only do it once a quarter. But nobody would say it's unscriptural to do it every first day of the week. So then, again, this is something in which we all agree, in which we already agree. And that is, you can be done every first day of the week. Now, however, notice I'm actually bringing in other practices that actually divide people and contrasting that to which they already agree is biblical, which can unite us. Other practices such as the daily mass or quarterly observance or Saturday night observances are practices that bring disagreement and division. Plus, substituting other items for unleavened bread and fruit of the divine is something else that the religious world cannot agree is scriptural. Again, disagreement and division. However, all agree that taking the Lord's Supper on the first day of the week, every first day of the week, using the same emblems that Jesus himself used, unleavened bread and fruit of the vine, is scriptural. And then I ask, are you willing to agree to do what you agree is scriptural? I mean, that's a rhetorical question, right? And they can't say no to it. So if so, come join our unity movement and weekly celebrate Christ. So that's the second point that I make. Any comments on this second one? No.
You're tying it really well together. I was wondering, after we're done with this, could you put it up the PDF so I can access it for my own work?
Sure.
Thank you.
And then the next one is immersion. Is baptism immersion, sprinkling, or pouring? Which is scriptural? Again, history says the early church only practiced immersion. And then I give some quotes. Baptism was by an immersion of the whole body in the baptismal font. It is evident that the term baptize means to immerse, and that this was the form used by the primitive church. And that quote is even from John Calvin. So, and then I say, even all the Greek dictionaries agree that baptism, baptizo, means immersion. And if you are blessed enough to witness us baptize someone into Christ, Galatians 3:27, you will see them immersed. The religious world is divided on whether or not sprinkling and pouring are scriptural. Yet every church agrees that immersion is scriptural. Personally, I've never met anybody who denied immersion is scriptural. They might not think it's the only way, but none of them will deny that it is a biblical way. So I ask, are you willing to agree to do what you agree is scriptural? If so, come join our unity movement and practice immersion. Any thoughts, questions, or disagreements on this third point? Okay. Looks like we're going to have a short class here, brothers.
Then I'll speak up. I'll eat up some time for you.
Go ahead.
Some would argue that if, as they believe, pouring and sprinkling are also approved by God, that to demand immersion is itself divisive.
Yes, they would, and that's a good point. And that's why this approach is, I'm not demanding people to agree this is the only way. I'm asking them, are they willing to do what they already agree is scriptural? And that's the controversial part of this approach. In other words, some people will say, I'm not being strict enough. But my goal is not to get everybody to agree on all of these things as the only way in the beginning. My goal is to start the conversation with what we already agree on is scriptural. if that makes sense. But that's why
Yes.
some people have problems with this approach, because they would say, well, are you telling them it's okay to still believe in sprinkling and pouring? And I would say, I'm beginning that discussion with them
Right.
by getting them to practice what they already agree with us on, and they already agree is scriptural. So this is kind of like a beginning step, not the final step.
So how do you want them to interpret, are you willing to agree to do?
To be immersed. They, if they have not yet been baptized, and if the way that this approach goes, and again, this is a different approach. It's kind of, as somebody, a good friend of mine said, I don't come through the front door. I don't come through the back door. I come through the side window. This is kind of like a side window approach to evangelism. If I can get them to agree that immersion is scriptural, that's really all I'm trying to do right now. And so, all those other things really divide people. Let's focus on what unites us. And again, this is kind of just, I would prove, like I already have, that the Bible does teach immersion. Now, they might argue, well, those other things are scriptural too. And then I would just have to say, but those other things you say are scriptural are actually things that people disagree on. So if we just simply stick with what we know the Bible teaches, look how we can be unified. So I'm kind of putting the onus on them. Do you want to practice what you know unifies, or do you want to practice what you know divides? Anybody else on this one? Because I understand this is controversial in some ways. I've had people tell me they didn't like this approach at all.
I do like this approach. Go ahead, George.
Yeah, I like the approach, Terry. I don't know why I have a problem with or challenged by your title, going back a few steps, our unity movement. There's something about that troubles me. I can't put a finger on it, but as far as the approach, I do like the approach you're taking. Yeah, I think it's good and has a lot of merit, because I don't know, Nancy and I've had discussions a lot about what's going on in our society and climate. And if this comes down to where government, steps in and really begins to punish believers, where are we going to be with those who, on these subjects that you brought up, disagree? I mean, you know what I'm talking about, that anti-God, anything opposed to Christ. There's so many things that we agree on with people in the religious world of Christianity. Anyway, but I do like the approach. I'm rambling, so I'll go on. But yeah, I like it.
Well, feel free to come up with a different title if you think it's better.
Okay.
I did not want to refer to the restoration movement as a unity movement.
Right. Yeah.
So
Which could be challenged.
What now, Alan?
Which could be challenged.
How so?
Because whereas unity was emphasized, obviously the movement has led to division.
Okay.
Yeah. Have you ever heard of Harold Dowdy's approach, Perry? Are you familiar with that?
I know of him, but I'm not sure what approach you are referring to.
Well, he starts with, and he starts with John 17, which is interesting because he says, Jesus said that the world may believe that you sent me. And he starts with, would you agree that one reason why we have so much unbelief in the world is because we're not doing what the Lord asked us to do in John 17? That's and most people say, yeah. And a lot of people say, well, what are you religiously? Well, nothing. Well, why? Because of all the division. So this could be a very appealing to some people, this approach, I think.
I think that especially in our culture today, which focuses so much on tolerance, a misunderstood tolerance, but the idea of tolerance, that this might appeal to them because I'm focusing on areas that everybody agrees on, basically. And so they would almost have to deny themselves what they are teaching and believing in order to deny this.
Except for on this point regarding baptism, they would be okay with let's all get unified in practicing, in teaching and practicing immersion, but they wouldn't get behind requiring everyone be immersed that had been sprinkled and poured.
No,
among,
right.
within the unified group.
Yeah, that is, again, one of the weaknesses of this approach. And like every approach, you're going to have positives and negatives to it. And I'll admit that is one of the weaknesses of this. But hopefully, through time and extra teaching, then you can. In a way, what this is devised to do is get them into the door for further teaching.
Yes, and we know we can't reach everyone.
Right.
We're trying to reach those that can be reached.
Yeah. So the next one is a cappella singing. You know, walk into our services and you will hear and can participate in a cappella music, where the only instruments being used are God-made, our hearts, souls, mind, and our bodies. And then again, you can see the repeating concept. Did you know that is something all Christians already agree on? All agree that singing is scriptural. Have you ever heard someone say that singing is unscriptural? No. And when you listen to denominational diatribes nowadays concerning music, one hears controversy and sees division, traditional or contemporary. That question is dividing churches totally or dividing them into offering different types of assemblies. And that question actually is nothing new. Arguments concerning styles of music are ancient. Erasmus, born in the 15th century, dealt with the same question. We have brought into our churches certain operatic and theatrical music, such a confused, disorderly chattering of some words as I hardly think was ever in any of the Grecian or Roman theaters. The church rings with the noise of trumpets, pipes, and dulcimers, and human voices strive to bear their part with them. Men run to church as to a theater to have their ears tickled, and for this end, organ makers are hired with great salaries, and a company of boys who waste all their time learning these whining tones. Okay, does that sound pretty much like today too? It does. In fact, if do you ever listen to Wretched Radio?
Never heard of it.
Go on YouTube.
Why would I?
Because I think they're using the word wretched as in Romans chapter 7. Who will free me from this wretched body? So I think that's why they call it wretched radio. Now, they are extremely reformed theologically, but they've got a video, which I haven't watched yet, that says basically, welcome to our circus churches. And they are very much against a lot of the, the theater that is going on. And so, here, people think that, the way that, churches are appealing to people, like in the purpose-driven church, very strongly by music, is something new, but it's really not. It's been going on for a couple thousand years. So 400 years ago, and yet just like today, when Christians worshiped 2,000 years ago, in the days of Peter, Paul, and John, all Christians were united in singing. In fact, historically speaking, instrumental music did not start until 600 years later. So for hundreds of years, Christians sang. Even 2,000 years later, we can all agree that praising God with only our voices is scriptural. So are you willing to agree to do what you agree is scriptural? If so, then come join our unity movement and sing. So that's the next one. Any thoughts, questions, disagreements on that one? Hopefully I'm teaching them not only the Bible, but I'm teaching them history also.
Yeah, I will. I mean, I think we all know that many of the Reformation movement had problems with the instrument. Luther, if I'm not mistaken, and others. Was it Luther that called it an ensign of Baal? The
That
organ?
I don't remember. What was the name of the prince of preachers? He was a Baptist preacher in the 1800s in England.
Charles Spurgeon. Charles Spurgeon.
Virgin, yeah.
His congregation was a cappella.
Right.
Okay, so I conclude with, we could go on and point out many other areas. People are not divided so much by what is in the Bible. We can agree on that. People are divided by what is not in the Bible. And that's, I think, an important distinction. So let us put aside what we cannot agree on and practice that which we all agree is scriptural. Simple, and maybe just radical enough to work. Do you think Jesus would be pleased? Are you willing to do what you agree is scriptural? If so, come join our unity movement.
I like it.
That is that approach. It's a different approach. It's got some weaknesses, some problems, but I think it's, again, if you understand, it's a way to get people in the door so that you can further study, then that's the strength of that approach.
I like it a lot. It's short, but it's to the point, and it, like you say, gets them through the door, and it's very novel, like the big picture approach. So it's a unifying thing right now with cancel culture and all. The news is negative, everything's negative, everything is divisive. When you're saying come join the unity movement and you show the positives of the Bible and how to be unified, that I think, especially during this day and age, is very appealing. Very appealing.
Good. Let me, I was editing it this morning, and as I was reading it to you guys, I realized that I have some more. Here is the handout that I have, and it's, it just folds into, well, where did it go? Can y'all see that?
Yeah.
Okay. And I I put it in 2 columns so that it could, be folded in. As you can see, Alan, I changed it from the Winston-Salem church to the Millersville church.
I like that.
And you got bejustachristian.com, which is a new web page that I bought the domain for. And I haven't done anything other than I've connected it to my other website, which is perrydocs.com, but that's more me having fun with puns and so forth, Perry's documents. But I've got a link, bejustachristian.com, but I want to develop that website by itself. I'm just not very good at doing things like that, so I just linked it to my other one. And so I'm hoping to, when I get there, to use this as an approach. Just one of the ways that I'm hoping to use.
Perry, have you thought about getting Spirit Building or Truth Magazine to make those into tracks and share it with the Brotherhood as a whole? Because that would be a very good material to hand out. I mean, just putting on the spot and everything, but
no, I guess if I was to put it into a tract, I would probably go with Toll Publishing because my son-in-law owns that. I don't know if they can do, I think he can do tracks. But the downside to that, Joseph, is I've received flack from people because of this approach.
Yeah, that's what I got.
Yeah, so I honestly, I don't know if people would want it. And if they did, I'm not sure that it would be to use in evangelism, but rather to be used
Divisively.
way.
Yeah,
I'll talk to my son-in-law, see if he wants to put it in track form. It might be too short to be a track though, because you saw it's just
the bifold.
Yeah. I don't know, but I'll be happy to. I can even send it to you, Joseph, in a Word document, and you can change it however you want and use it. Of course, you'd have, if I send it to you PDF, then, I've already got Millersville in there. So if I just send it to you a Word document, then you can put it in any form that you want, and it might be more useful that way.
thank
Send
you.
it to me too, Perry.
Okay.
I like to look at it. And that's why I said our unity movement. I'm afraid that would be the first flag that people would say if you tried to publish it with others. I mean, I know what you're trying to get at. Maybe we could call it Alan and Perry's unity movement.
As long as we put my name first.
No, so I don't know. I don't have as much of a problem with it, but I think there are going to be some people that would say, "Uh-oh." I mean, even sadly, when we talk about unity movement, it's like, okay, are we going back to Carl Ketcher's side and all the stuff that people think of?
Well, and that would be if brethren were going to have a problem with it, I would expect it would be those that are hypersensitive about Ketcher's side and unity and diversity.
Right.
Which back to John 17, I think a lot that we've said about John 17, we were actually talking about denominational unity, which of course the New Testament doesn't talk about. Ketcher's side was talking about unity and diversity among denominations. parish unity movement is actually the unity movement of the local church, where there is unity and diversity. But some would just react to that apparent unity and diversity, and that's a hot button for them. I'm not sure how much we should worry about that, as long as the local church where this approach is being used agrees it's a good approach. Then
I agree.
it doesn't really matter how much people outside might disagree.
Yeah, no, you're right about that for sure. Yeah.
Well, let's look at three different groups of people in reference to this little approach. One, the local congregation. Two, the brotherhood. And three, the lost. Now, the brotherhood, quote unquote, might have a problem with this approach because they're linking it to, Catcher-side, university, and diversity. And maybe some in a local congregation might too. But I guarantee you, the lost, that's not on their mind at all. They don't even know any of that stuff.
Amen.
And so if this approach is practical and helpful, it will be because it appeals to those who are not yet in Christ, despite it not appealing to those who are in Christ and focused on division themselves. If that's too plain spoken, I'm sorry.
And
Oh, true.
And it is a very real issue that local churches have been discouraged from being evangelistic out of fear of what brethren and other congregations would think about their approach. We need to learn to not worry about what brethren in other congregations would think about what we're doing.
Probably every,
Yep.
well, I won't say all of us. I will say I have been the on the wrong side of gossip because of what we were doing as a local congregation. And that's really sad. I have had a gospel meeting canceled, lost support, all because I was considered, quote, liberal, or I was practicing unity and diversity. And one of my arguments is every single time you baptize somebody, you are practicing unity and diversity.
Amen.
It's that simple. Because I don't think you gotta, teach somebody before they're baptized what the meaning of husband of one wife or other qualifications for the eldership. And even on that, in congregations, does everybody always agree on the meaning of every single qualification for an elder? No, they don't. Is the phrase husband of one wife or children who are not accused of wildness and rebellion, or if he is not able to rule his own household, are those doctrinal issues?
Or faithful.
Yeah, or the term faithful, that's really the one I was looking for, but my brain is like Swiss cheese. It's got a lot of holes in it.
Well, and more basic things related to the nature of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, which one God, one Lord, one Spirit is is in our unity list in Ephesians 4 will accept disagreement on those things in most congregations. It makes no sense for us to pretend like our unity is conformity. We have a foundation that we agree on, but even there, we're not in lockstep conformity in our concepts. But we're astray.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of different approaches to use in evangelism, and I am an advocate of try something different. Not for the sake of just being different, but rather because when you look in the scriptures, you see different approaches. You tailor the approach to the people. And this is an approach that I think, while the brotherhood might have some problems with it, you're not trying to reach the brotherhood.
Amen.
You're trying to reach those that are searching. And the idea of, yeah, you know, you're right. I do agree we can just call ourselves Christians. I do agree you can take the Lord's Supper every first day of the week. I do agree that, you know, immersion, well, you know, actually that makes a lot of sense. It's a beautiful picture. You know, I do agree that we could just sing. And so you're just really focused on getting them almost to agree with themselves and do what they already know is right. And that
is there is a part, maybe a significant part of our culture that buys into Rayner's simple church kind of approach, that churches have gotten so bogged down and complicated that it gets in the way of unity. And this approach appeals to unity through simplicity.
When it comes time to having a simple mind, I'm pretty simple-minded. I'm a simpleton. You guys got anything else on this?
Yeah, just to share again with Harold Dowdy, you know, he starts with John 17. He says, you know, there was a time when there was just one church. And as far as I'm concerned, there still is.
Right.
And he goes to the history of the church movement, which is another different, interesting approach. But the way he ends is interesting. It may be another topic you might find a way to add to it. And he talks about the fact that the great divide, even in quote unquote Christianity, is salvation by works or salvation by grace only. And he says, do you know there's an answer to that? And he goes to, you know, the Roman passages and the James passage and said, have you ever thought about the fact that Paul and James brought these two great conflicts together and the will of God? And I know that some have, that I've shared that with, go, wow, I never thought about that. Some have. I don't know. I'm just thinking that might be something else you might add, find a way to add to your.
No, George, you've just volunteered to teach a class on Harold Dowdy's approach.
Oh, boy.
and Romans.
Alan, help.
So I will tell Royce, we now have some volunteers.
Oh, boy.
I just hope y'all remember what you volunteered to do, because I don't.
Yeah. I predict that next week you'll have a class with Perry and Joseph.
Me too.
Well, Joseph is doing some pretty good work. Just saw a video on evangelism that he just posted. So, Joseph, congratulations. You have volunteered to share with us some of your ideas that you are putting into video form.
Sure thing. Anytime, let me know, and I'd love to join and do this with you. But I love having you present stuff because you got a lot of fresh ideas, and it's always a great way to get my mind stirred up to think up new thoughts.
Well, I'm good at stirring people up. Usually in a bad way. Anything else?
Yeah, I
Hi.
really like what you
Go ahead.
I really like what you shared. I think it'll make a nice devotional to talk with somebody about the gospel as an opener, just getting together, and it's a good intro into the themes of Christianity. So
Yeah.
well
Yeah,
done. Well
that's
done.
really, if we understand, it's an introduction. It's to get them into the door. It's, we live in a world where people either thrive on controversy or they shy away from it. And sometimes you got to use both approaches. It's like,
Not necessarily at the same time.
no, not necessarily the same time. Depends on the people. I think his name is Crowder. I've mentioned him before. He's a political pundit, and he'll set up tables at college campuses on something controversial and says, "Convince me I'm wrong." And it's meant to be controversial. And so if you're interested in something like that, which I think could also be tailored to evangelism. And I've talked to Royce about that. That is one approach. The other, because some people love controversy. They love to get in an argument. And sometimes when you're getting in an argument with somebody, you're actually not trying to convince them, you're trying to convince the people who are watching.
Right.
And then the other approach here is people who don't like controversy. And say, look, you already agree with us on so many things. Why don't you give us a try? And that's the purpose of that. It's an introduction.
Yep. Very good approach.
Well, we have about used up our time. Anybody got anything else before we go?
Yeah, I'm going to create a banner for the next time I go to the campus. Join Alan and Perry's Unity Movement. Not really. No, really. It's a very, very, very good. I definitely want the Word document myself. I'd like to take a look at it. I can see the possibilities there.
I look at it like this. I am not interested in, copywriting it. Use it however you think works best for you. Change it, take out immersion if you want, add something else, change the title. I really don't care. I'm just trying to share an idea that I've used before that who knows if it will work. I've only used it a little bit because there's just one problem with this, I'll admit, is there are so many different approaches that sometimes you can start something but never really see how effective it is, because then you come up with another approach.
Right.
So if you guys find this helpful or ways to improve it, let me know, because I want to use it but I also want to use it as effectively as possible.
Can I
Okay,
throw this out there, Perry?
yeah,
I know George and I would benefit from your content. This is just the thought. If you posted it on our forum, other people might benefit as well, especially if they see the video. But I mean, whatever you want to do, this is your material, and I'm grateful to get a chance to go over it and have it in access it. So I appreciate that.
I will see if I can figure out how to put an attachment onto the Challenges in Evangelism Facebook page.
Great.
Sounds great.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen, for encouraging me this morning. I appreciate it. Always need
Thank
it.
you, Perry.
Now I've got to
Thank you.
I got to
Yes.
pack up boxes and books so that, Alan will leave me alone.
Yeah.
Talk to you later.
You
Bye.
take care. Take care, Joseph. Hope you get better soon.
Thank you. Good to see you guys.
Amen.
Thank you. Nice to meet you, Alan.
Bye.